IT wise.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my kids were totally different people by the time I got them back.
Boys are always late bloomers. They don't tend to develop like the women, young women.
Pizza life.
Oh, yeah. I have 3 sisters. 4 sisters. Well, I have
No, we're gonna keep this up. I'm about ready to get off.
4 to, no,
Carrying guns.
I don't. That is the
Wild,
worst
wild
thing.
west.
I was a super.
Would someone please tell us what's going on?
Like I said, typical Worthington IT problems.
They were, they've been different.
If I can have your attention, I'm gonna go ahead with some of our pre-announcements, because we have our people online. But I just want to thank you for coming to sharing our story. It's an opportunity to see that Columbus is part of a much bigger world. And I'll introduce the speaker here in just a few minutes, but I do want to remind our online audience to please mute
Your participants cannot hear what's going on. Your participants cannot hear what's going on. Your participants cannot hear what's going on.
Really clear message. All right, we're going to try again. This is Roger Bloker.
Your participants cannot hear what's going on.
Okay, he's starting to, but we can't.
Participants cannot hear what's going on.
We understand that you cannot
Your
hear.
participants cannot hear what's
Okay.
going on.
Okay.
Okay, one more time. This is Roger Bloker. I am the understudy for Anne, who is normally introducing these sessions.
All right, we're going to try again. This is Roger Bloker. Your participants cannot hear what's going on.
Okay, he's starting to, but we can't.
Would everybody please mute your devices? And we advise you to please also do not share the video. That just puts more traffic on the highway and it can cause some problems. Thank you very much. Again, we're starting a little bit late because the Turkish American Society of Ohio was kind enough to bring refreshments. And those that are on site are enjoying those refreshments right now. So I do thank you all for coming tonight. Our speaker this evening is Kevin Reichley. He was in the service and stationed in Turkey for about 16 months. I guess he was originally scheduled for 12 and was lucky enough to extend it for 4 more months so that he could get more familiar with the great people, the culture, the language, the foods, and the history of the country. So at the end, if everybody would please hold your questions, we'll have time at the end of the session for you to ask questions in hopes that maybe Kevin might answer some of your questions during the presentation itself. So with that, Kevin, please meet your audience.
Thank you, Roger. Good evening. Quick question first. How many of you are from Turkey? Okay.
Or have been to Turkey.
Now I'd like to do from Turkey first, okay? İyi akşamlar. For those who aren't from Turkey, how many before you heard about the program tonight ever heard of Sinop?
Sinop.
Before you saw anything about the program, how many of you ever heard of the city of Sinop? Okay, very few. And that's not unusual. So when most people think of Turkey, they think of Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, the cities on the Aegean and on the Mediterranean. My opinion, the forgotten area of Turkey is the Karadeniz, the Black Sea area. So I'm going to talk tonight about Sinop. a wonderful city. Hopefully you'll see more about why I think it's so wonderful and why I think the people are so wonderful. But before we get started, now how do I do that? Okay, this. A little bit of geographic context. So first of all, can you all hear me in the back okay? Okay. I'm not using it.
There's a separate mic for the YouTube.
Okay. So I'm gonna move this down. Okay. So for those, a little bit of geographic context. Sinop is up on the Black Sea, about halfway across the northern Turkey Black Sea coast. You see it here in relationship to Ankara, the capital of Turkey, and Istanbul, the largest city in Turkey. Sinop is also the name not only of the city, but of the province. Turkey has 81 provinces. Sinop province is the northernmost province, as you see on the map. If we zoom in a little bit and go to the northern part of Sinop province, we see Sinop city. I'll mark there. If we look to the right, in the yellow area, that's really the extent of the urban area of Sinop when I was there 50 years ago. The red area is the extent of what I consider the urban area now. So it's expanded greatly. You'll notice Sinop sits on a narrow piece of land between the Turkish mainland and a peninsula, Boztepe Peninsula. Now the local Turks call that Ada, or island. So I'm going to call it the island tonight, okay? So that's the Sinop Island out on the right and the mainland over on the left. Now a little bit of historical context. So Sinop, this is a postcard from the late 1800s. And you notice the wall around the town. That was built about 3,000 years ago. And that was built obviously for defense purposes. But much of that wall still stands today. And I'll show you some photos of that. But Sinop enjoyed many civilizations: Romans, Greeks, Hittites, Persians, Ottomans, Seljuks. So a wide variety of civilizations were there. They built many structures, and many of those structures are still there today to walk around and enjoy. So let's start my story. So let's go back in time 52 years. March 1972. The United States was embroiled in two wars, Vietnam and the Cold War. I was a 19-year-old soldier, just finished almost a year and a half of training. And I got my orders and they said, "You're going to Sinop." And I said, "Where's Sinop?" And they said, "Well, it's in Turkey." And I barely knew where Turkey was on a map. So I had to go to the library. We didn't have cell phones to look up our internet. Went to the library and looked up where Sinop was. So that's the first I had heard of Sinop. And in April 10th, I was on my way. So I flew from my home in Cleveland, Ohio to JFK at New York, and then an 11-hour flight to Ankara. Stayed overnight there. The next morning I got up and I took a flight from Ankara to Samsun, another city up on the Black Sea coast. So this was the airplane. Now this is my first real exposure to Turkey. Again, 19-year-old kid. I had hardly been out of the state of Ohio, knew nothing about anything foreign at all. Get on this plane. Every Turkish male was smoking cigarettes, the whole flight. And also, most of them, or many of them, had animals with them. So they had chickens in cages, they had rabbits in cages, carrying the animals on board the plane with them. And one elderly gentleman even had a goat that was walking up and down the aisles. So I thought, what have I gotten myself into? So the next leg of the journey was from Samsun to Sinop, about 100 miles. Back then, there were no modern highways at all. We had gravel roads, gravel and sometimes dirt roads for 100 miles. It was a 4-hour journey. Now the view was beautiful. We're heading towards Sinop, going west. On the right, beautiful views of the Black Sea. On the left, mountains, beautiful green mountains. Saw a lot of sheep, shepherds, etc. But the road was very treacherous, and there have been many accidents on that road, some involving Americans over the years. But that was another part of my introduction to Turkey, this difficult, treacherous journey on a road from Samsun to Sinop. Now, as we get close to Sinop, you see we're on a gravel road. And in the distance, we could see, again, what I call the island. And on top of that island is the joint American-Turkish Army base. If we get a little closer, we're seeing the north side of the island. And you can see the base from that perspective as well. We get even closer, and now we're seeing the harbor. On the south side of the island is the harbor, protected harbor. On the north side is open Black Sea, very different at times. So the south side on the harbor, you see the old walls. Some of the old walls there are still standing, almost 3,000 years old. The wall closest to us, there's a white building there. That's the Turkish prison, a pretty famous prison, sometimes referred to as the Alcatraz of Turkey. But you can see the over on the left, sticking out into the water, the main pier, main Sinop pier, and an inner harbor area. I'll show you more later. So as we get into town, this is what I saw. The roads were narrow. This is the main street in Sinop at the time, Sakarya Street. And this, you notice, mostly pedestrians. There were more animal-powered vehicles than there were motor-powered vehicles at the time. All of on the bottom floor are retail shops, and above that, apartments, some wooden, some concrete. So we finally get up to the base. This is the joint Turkish-American Army base. There were about, I think at that time, about 300 American soldiers stationed there. There were also Turkish soldiers. Now, the main function of the Turkish soldiers was to provide security around the perimeter, because there's a lot of sensitive information on the base. There were also Turkish workers. The workers were cooks, drivers, mechanics. We had our own fire station on base. They were the firemen. So they did a lot of the work that Americans would sometimes do on bases, but here we hired local Turks to do the work, local Sinopians. Now you might say, why would we have an American base in Sinop? Here's why. If you notice where Sinop, the red dot is strategically located because this is the Cold War, the Soviet Union, Georgia, Russia, Ukraine, Moldova were all part of the Soviet Union. So they were our enemies. So we were there to listen in. We did covert monitoring of their communication signals, primarily military and government communications, captured that data, recorded it, analyzed it, sent it on to some organizations in the United States. Because the American base was situated on the hill on the western part of that peninsula, we had a great view of the city of Sinop. So this is the view that we had from our base. Virtually every day we saw beautiful views of Sinop. Sometimes Sinop was covered by clouds, so you couldn't see it, but this is a normal view. On the left, sticking out in the water, that's the main pier. We'll see more of that in a few minutes. So you can see the town of Turkey. You see how, Sinop. You can see how narrow that is on that piece of land there. And beyond that is the Turkish mainland. So now let's go down into town. Sinop in the 70s was very peaceful, very serene. Just a beautiful, nice place to be. And this is a view of the harbor, actually the inner harbor area. The white building on the right, we'll see more of that later. That's the Buzhane, the ice house. And you can see some of the wall behind that or past that. This is more views of the main streets in Sinop, Sakarya Street. Notice that some of the wooden structures were still there, Ottoman architecture on the picture on the right. Just a lot of pedestrian traffic, bicycles, few motorcycles, but mostly bicycles. This is a typical side street off of the main streets. So most of the residences look like this, 2 or 3 stories, often multiple members of the same family or families that are related in the same buildings. You can see construction, wood, stone, a little bit of concrete at the time. Looks very different now. So this is a nice view of Sinop from on top of the old city wall. Part of it called the clock tower, we'll see later. But I like this particular picture for the reason that it shows the transition. At that time, Sinop was in the transition between the old wooden residences and the new, on the left, concrete apartment buildings. So Sinop was at the very early stages of what I call the concretization of Sinop, which changed the landscape dramatically over the years. Up behind the, houses, well, on top you can see the army base, but there were a lot of farms up there, fields for sheep, some olive trees up there, very nice rural areas. This was part of the industrial area of Sinop on the north side of town near the North Black Sea coast. So I like this transition slide too, because on the right, you see the old animal-powered carts and vehicles used a lot for the local transportation. On the left, a new diesel truck. So there was both at that time. Obviously, over time, it got to be more and more mechanized. So in this area, there were, I guess I'd call it repair shops, light manufacturing, those kind of jobs, those kind of buildings. Now let's go into the main part of the harbor. Here we're on the main pier looking back toward the south shore of Sinop. On the, if you look kind of that building in the middle, that's the Sinop Palace, the Sinop Castle. And you can't see too well behind the trees, but that wall continues back for quite a ways. On the right, you see a what was then the largest hotel in Sinop, Melia Kasem, which the Americans refer to as the Yeni Hotel or New Hotel. And in between the two was the Sinop City Park, which included the Chai Bachasi, the tea garden. So this was really the center of social life in Sinop at the time. And here's the Chai Bachasi, the tea garden. So beautiful area under trees. You could buy simit, well, obviously tea, it's a tea garden. Tea, simit, salted pumpkin seeds, ice cream, you know, a few things, refreshments in essence. But, pardon me? Toast. But there were hundreds of chairs and tables here. So this was the center of social life. People came here just to relax, socialize, families met, friends met. And I spent a lot of time here, right on the Black Sea coast. This is another view of the main pier from the Melia Kasem Hotel, looking toward the pier. Those wooden boats were used for transport on the Black Sea, so not great distances, but they were used, you know, to haul cargo such as timber, coal, grain, other things like that. And you notice along the seafront, more tables and chairs. So if you want to get really close to the Black Sea, you sat over there. Now, this is a special slide for me because it was home for 16 months. The Sinop Castle is on the right here. The building to the left above that police station, the triangular roof, kind of a yellowish building, that was Aktan apartment building. That's where I lived. And I lived on that top floor with 3 other Americans. And we had, you can tell from the location, we had some wonderful views of Sinop Harbor. This is one of the views from the roof of our apartment. This is the inner harbor. So at that time, it was very quiet. Now, there are usually more boats than that here. They were probably out for the day, but this was almost all fishing boats and other types of working boats. There were virtually no pleasure boats at that time. And I'll come back to that later, okay? From my apartment balcony or roof, I could also see the main pier. And here's a couple more of the wooden cargo ships of that time. Now, as I mentioned before, Sinop enjoyed many, many civilizations over the years, and a lot of structures still there. So I was used to Cleveland, Ohio, where probably the oldest building I ever saw was 50 or 60 years old. Here we're seeing buildings, you know, I saw buildings that were hundreds or thousands of years old. So this is one of the mosques that's called the Sayyid Bilal Mosque. This is about halfway down from the base to the town. But the oldest and largest mosque in Sinop was Aladdin Jami, or Aladdin Mosque. That was built in the 1200s. It's been restored a few times over the years, but it's still in active use today as a mosque. Now let's talk about how modern or not so much Sinop was at the time. No televisions. I didn't see a television the whole time I was in Sinop. There were no, well, there were radios, but you could pick up maybe two, if you're lucky, 3 stations, very staticky, so not much there. Telephones, basically non-existent. A few government officials had them in their homes for necessity. There were a few businesses that had telephones, but there was no direct dial. If you remember the old United States switchboard system, you picked up and you either told the switchboard operator a phone number or say, get me Ujan's boat shop, something like that. I never used a phone over there, but that's the kind of technology. Now, the other thing was there were no refrigerators. No refrigerators at all. So I pointed out, I think before, I'll show you again, the Buzhani, the ice house. The purpose of the ice house was to make ice, chunks of ice. And that was used by fishermen, obviously, when they got their catch to keep them cold and fresh. Some of the businesses like restaurants. If you had a special event, like a wedding or a circumcision party or something, you might go down there and ask for a block of ice. So if you bought a block of ice to take back, this boy would take it to your house for you. So that was the mode of getting those blocks of ice back to where they needed to be. Now, what else did Sinopians do for entertainment? Again, not much by way of technology. Sinop's on the Black Sea front, so a lot of the time was spent outdoors, spent on the beaches, spent in the Black Sea, swimming, snorkeling, fishing, those kinds of activities, or hanging out on the beach. There were many, many beaches in Sinop, still are. Another popular form of entertainment was the cinema. Again, no TV, so they relied on cinema for seeing anything on a screen. This is the Cinnamon own Yeti, Cinema 117. And this was one of 2 cinemas at the time, indoors. And outdoors in the summer, there were outdoor theaters. These weren't drive-ins, these were walk-ins. So you'd walk in, you'd sit on a long bench and enjoy the movie. Now, typically, both of these cinemas, there were 2 movies shown, a Turkish movie, then an American movie. And the Sinopians loved the American movies with John Wayne and Bruce Lee at the time. So I'll never forget watching a movie at the Melek Cinema, Angel Cinema on the right, the summer one, and seeing John Wayne speaking Turkish with American Indians. So those were some interesting times. Now, this is the social event of the week. That boat is called a Karadeniz Vapur, a Black Sea steamer. The Turkish Maritime Service had 2 of these boats, the Izmir and the Ege, going between Istanbul in the west to close to the Georgian border on the east and stopping at 10 ports along the way. So every week it left Istanbul, went all the way to the east, and then on its way back, stopped at Sinop every Saturday morning, usually late morning. And so all the townspeople, or a vast majority of them, came down to watch that. That was a very interesting part of their week, to see this huge boat, which Americans just called the white boat, to see the white boat come, drop off passengers, pick up passengers bound for Istanbul. You see here the boat's just coming in, a lot of people on the pier there. And this is a close-up of some of the people on the pier. So a lot of activity, a lot of people. I'm not sure how many people ended up falling into the Black Sea, but that's very possible. But you see, there were a lot of street vendors at the time. So you see a Sinop cart there. So that little girl in the yellow is anxiously waiting for her Sinop, her mother's buying for her. So people would come hours before the boat was scheduled to arrive to get their tables and chairs in the tea garden. So you'll see some of that activity here, and they're all there to watch the white boat, or the Karadenis Vapor, come and stay. It was usually there 5-6 hours, I think, and then headed out to Istanbul. And I was able to take a couple of those journeys from Sinop to Istanbul on those boats. Now, what else did they do? Well, boys tended to be outside all the time, weather permitting, of course. But there were all these nice historic buildings, structures, and the boys loved to run around those, climb them, whatever. This is part of the city wall, the clock tower. And you see a bunch of boys on the top and some down at the bottom, and they're all waving. And the boys, especially the boys, sometimes girls, but mostly boys, they love to have their pictures taken by Americans. And we used to carry candy or other things sometimes to give them. And some Americans had Polaroid cameras, if you know what those are. Take a picture, and 60 seconds later, you hand them a photo. And they just went nuts over those. Now, at this period, Americans had color film. The Sinopians did not. So anytime a Sinopian, even till today, sees a photo from Sinop that an American took in those days, they just go nuts over that. They love to see these color photos. And these are just some of, I could put dozens of photos up here of different parts of some of the structures and the Sinop wall and other places. Plenty of opportunity to run around and play. Now, one of the main reasons I went back to Sinop was to see old friends from 50 years ago. This was one of my best friends, Halit, excuse me. This is Shukru Gamush. His nickname was Habesh. Habesh was like a father to me there. He took me under his wing. He was friend to a lot of Americans, but I got to spend a lot of time with him. He was a well-known, highly respected fisherman in town. And I often went out on his diesel wooden boat, go fishing, net fishing or catching sand shark. He took me to a lot of different places, taught me a lot about Sinop, about Turkey, about the culture, about their traditions. Just a wonderful, wonderful man. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago. On the right, the young guy in the yellow T-shirt is an American friend. The other guy is Habesh's son, Halit Gamush. Halit is still a friend to me today. He's now a journalist in Sinop. But I knew him as a high school student. He often hung around when his father and I were out doing something. These are two very special friends, Nazmi Kru and Nazim Oskara. Nazmi owned the barbershop, Nato Barbary, NATO barbershop. And it was a special event to go to the barbershop in Turkey. It's not like here you go get a haircut, 15 minutes, you're out of there. Here it's a social event. You walk in, they ask you what you want to drink. They don't have it there. They yell out the door. A kid comes running. They give him his order. He goes, runs and gets it. He carries it in a tray, brings it in, and you sit there for 15 minutes, a half hour, 45 minutes before you even start the haircut. So beyond the haircut, they did shaves, hot towel shaves. They used straight razors. In fact, my only wound in the Army was a little nick I got from the straight razor. Nazim, it wasn't his fault. I jerked my head or something, but I still wear that scar with pride. But these were just two wonderful, hospitable, friendly people. Unfortunately, they've both since passed away, but I keep in touch with some members of their families. The gentleman on the left is Oktay Karu. Oktay is Nazmi's son. At this time, he was an English teacher. That's with two of my roommates. I lived in the apartment with 3 other Americans. And this is on the roof of our apartment. You could see behind, we could, right by the city wall there. And this is very special. This is Nazim, the younger barber. He took me to different places. He taught me, he was only a few years older than I was. So I learned a lot about being a young man in Turkey, looking for a bride at that time. He found one. I was one of few Americans invited to his wedding. A village, very traditional village wedding out in Osmaniye, a village outside of Sinop city. I-10 was the bride. So, but very, very special day. It was the first day I had fresh goat's milk, still warm out of the goat. So some interesting goodies there. But he was very special, taught me a lot about, helped me learn some Turkish. Just very, very nice guy to hang around with. So that's the Sinop I knew back then, 70 years ago. Beautiful seaside town. You could see the harbor front there, the Army base up on top, and a lot of undeveloped land between the town and the base. Now, my friends taught me a lot of things about Turkey, a lot about the language, the culture, about some of the traditions, some of the customs. But by living with them for 16 months and watching and seeing how they lived, I learned some life lessons. So I want to mention 2 of them tonight because they mean a lot to me. The first thing I learned was you don't need a lot of money to be happy. You don't need a lot of money or material things to be happy. Most of the people I knew in Sinop were very happy. They were satisfied with their lot in life. They didn't have a lot of money, material possessions. They certainly didn't have modern conveniences like, we Americans at that time were even used to. But they had faith, they had family, they had friends, they had neighbors that would watch out for them. So they were generally very optimistic. They were very much, like I said, very happy and very grateful for everything they had. So to me, that was an important lesson that I learned there. The second lesson was that I learned, I should back up a minute before I mention this. So when I first got to Sinop, I was up on the base. Other American soldiers that had been there for a while, they warned me, don't go down into town. They said the Turkish people aren't friendly. They said the Turkish people are unsophisticated, they're uneducated, they're poor, and even dangerous at times. So many Americans learned about that from other Americans that were there, and that got passed along. And so many Americans that were stationed in Sinop rarely went down into town. Now, a lot of them now I talked to later, many years later, they regret that. But at the time, they believed it. Fortunately, I was a little curious, so I went down and I met people and found out they were friendly, found out that they were just some of the nicest people I'd ever met and been with. So the other thing I learned was differences don't matter. People can be very different language, different cultures, different backgrounds, different traditions, and you can still be friends and you can still get along and you can still be happy together. And I'm just so grateful that I met so many people I'm still friends with. A lot of Americans met, Turkish soldiers up on base or met Turkish workers up on base and became friends, and some of them are still lifelong friends. So to me, that was a very important lesson that I learned. Now, this is, now. So 50 years later, what do we have? We've got a very growing city. We have a tourist destination in the summer. This photo is taken from the Sinop Castle. In the foreground is the city park, the Chai Bachasi, the tea garden. Beyond that, it's hard to show without the pointer, but along the shore of that green area, that's all filled in land since I was there. They filled it in, they built a beautiful park, little restaurants there, play areas for the kids, park benches, just real nice place to stroll. They have a little wide path in there, they call it Lover's Street. Just very nice. And right on the edge of the sea is a boardwalk area. So in the summer, vendors have lined up with little vendor booths. They sell souvenirs and other things there. Just a very active city, especially in the summer, especially with tourists. But you can see the difference between the old and the new. Now, Sinop is still a fishing town, still very important for them, commercial fishing. Difference is the boats got bigger and more technology. So no more wooden boats. Now they have very modern, technologically advanced boats. Now I want to show you a series of photos to contrast old and new to give you a little bit better perspective. So this is the view I showed you before coming into town. This is the view now. So modern roads, modern vehicles, modern apartment buildings. Now the base is still up there. Notice that on top of the hill. It's no longer an army base. The Americans were there from the mid-50s to the late 90s. And then the Turkish army took over. So now it's a Turkish army base, a military intelligence base. But you can see the contrast in that 50-year photo. I showed you this early, the Inner Harbor area. This is what it looks like today. Now, I took this photo from my apartment roof. This photo is also from my old apartment. The Octon family that I rented from in 1972 still owns this building. And one of the Octon family members arranged to allow me to go up to my old apartment to see the apartment and take photos. But this is the Inner Harbor. Notice there's a tourist boat. And right along the harbor in the foreground area, floating restaurants. So floating seafood restaurants. And most of the boats here, other than at the far end, the big boats where there's 4 or 5 across, most of the boats here are pleasure boats. They're not working boats, except for those fishing boats. This was the old main street in Sinop, Sakarya Street. This is now. So most streets now, or many of the streets in the old part of town are one way. There are no traffic lights in Sinop. They've just built the first traffic light, and I think it was in the last year or two, out on the mainland area by the new hospital. But in the old part of Sinop, no traffic lights. People rely on some rotaries and common courtesy to get by. So you could see a lot of modern apartments, and this street is still the retail center of Sinop. There are no shopping malls. There are no shopping centers. This is retail in Sinop, lined with all kinds of stores, modern stores, jewelry stores, cell phone stores, drug stores, different kind of souvenir stores, etc., clothing stores. Now, in the summer, when the tourists are here, this gets very crowded. And traffic is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest problem Sinop has today, because it's a very restricted area, especially in that narrow part. But this is kind of what it looks like. But they did widen the sidewalks, some nice pedestrian ways to get through. This was the old Black Sea steamer I showed you, or Dennis Vapeur, at the dock. Now notice the length of that pier 50 years ago. Here's today. So this is, and I think, yeah, I think we have it kind of, the picture's kind of, it's much longer than that. But anyway, that's the Astoria Grande. That's a Russian ship. It goes from Sochi to Istanbul on a regular schedule in the summer, and it stops at Sinop. So this is kind of what it looks like these days. There's no more Turkish Black Sea passenger service, unfortunately. But there are cruise ships like this one that come in, other cruise ships come in periodically too. So the pier was elongated. The floor there was deepened, so now it can accommodate some of those bigger ships, cruise ships. In the foreground, you see one of the tourist boats. They run all summer long, early morning till very late at night. So you can take cruises of the harbor and see some beautiful sights that way. The picture on the left is Batur Street. That's it. So this was a narrow street off of the main street. And you could see those tables set up. Now, this is the old Sinop version of Worthington Farmers Market. Okay, so you can all relate to that. So you see the stand set up, the villagers brought in their produce 1 or 2 days a week, sold there. On the right, no more farmers market there. There were cars. Modern street cars, modern apartments. It's changed quite a bit. This is the farmers market. This is Sinop in Turkish Pazar. This is English bazaar or farmers market. 2 days a week, Sinopians can come buy their produce. It's undercover, so the weather doesn't matter. There are some shops along both sides, a huge area where you can buy all your fresh produce, eggs, milk, flowers, I mean, all kinds of stuff. Villagers bring it in. You just walk around, buy it all, and take it home. So this is, at those days, the Sinopians did not have an airport, no air service. But the Americans did. The Americans had a small airport for military use. We had a small plane or two at times. They would run regular routes daily to Samsun to drop off mail and pick up mail and sometimes some cargo. Now, yes, you guys chuckle a little bit, Eşek Airlines. Now, the reason it's called Eşek in Turkish means donkey. The reason some Sinopians originally thought Americans were being negative, but they weren't. They were really honoring the value of donkeys traditionally in Turkish transport in that area. Donkeys were pulling a lot of the carts around town. So they were basically a somewhat honored animal, so that Americans named the airport Eşek Airlines. This is the new airport. Very modern airport, as nice as any I've ever seen. And in fact, now there's even an international gate. There's no international flights yet, but they're ready for them. There's air service to and from Istanbul daily right now. But very new, modern, easy to get in and out. Now, this is one of the museums 50 years ago, the Sinop Archaeology Museum. This is that same museum today. Okay, it's been enlarged, it's been widened, and they have very modern type of exhibits. So a lot of the archaeology findings from around the Sinop area from excavations are housed here. So there are tablets, there are coins, there are all kinds of materials. Sinop now also has an ethnographic museum. So it's built in an old 18th century mansion, and it's got 3 floors filled with rooms of exhibits like this, artifacts exhibited, but showing the culture of the Sinop area over time, Seljuks and Ottomans, and into the early part of the Republic. Now, this is a very well-known place in Turkey. This is the Sinop prison. So this was built in the late 1800s, and it was an active prison up until the, I believe, late 1990s. So when I lived in Turkey, This was in full operation. Have any of you seen the movie Midnight Express? If you have, you know what I'm talking about. This was a Turkish prison. If people didn't bring you food daily, you didn't eat. So there were some times where American soldiers were imprisoned for different things. And we had to have either the chaplain or the MP or somebody from the base bring them food every day. But this was many of the Turkish writers and other folks got imprisoned here. And there have been a lot of famous poems. In the later stages, there were a lot of Turkish, well, since it closed as a prison, Turkish movies and Turkish TV shows have been filmed here. But in 1989, it became a museum, and it just went through an extensive renovation the last year or two, and it's a beautiful museum to walk through the actual prison of those times. And they left prisoner inscriptions on the walls and other things, so you get the real authentic feeling of what that prison was like. Now, one of the main reasons I went back to Sinop was to see old friends. So on the left, I showed you the picture of Halit, on the right in the old picture, and this is Halit now. Again, a journalist in Turkey. He presented me with a photo of my friend, his father, Abesh Shukru Gamush, very valuable to me. We spent a lot of time together when I was in Sinop. This is Oktay Karu, I showed you before. He's on the left. He's on the roof of our apartment. On the right, you see him. After I left Sinop in the early 70s, he became, in the late 70s, the official post interpreter on the base. So he served in that capacity till the base closed in the early 90s. Obviously speaks very fluent English, but we spent a lot of time back in Sinop reminiscing about some of the old days, talking about his father and his family. This is on the left, Nilgun Jabachi. Nilgun is Oktay's sister, the daughter of my friend Nazmi Karu. She hosted us at her apartment, which is just down the street from where I lived 50 years ago. My son and I were there. And this is Nilgun with her husband, Suha, hosted us there. I mentioned Nazim and his wife, Ayten. Nazim, again, unfortunately passed away, but I was able to reconnect with Ayten. My son and I are with Ayten, and one of her sons, Jahid. She has two sons, but we correspond. We've been corresponding for several years over in Facebook. But she hosted us at her apartment. We had refreshments. We looked at old photos. We talked a lot about her late husband, my good friend, Nazim. This is Nazim's brother, Shaheen Oskara, and he's a Muhtar. So you guys know what a Muhtar is, right? But basically, I'll try to explain it. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but in essence, it's an elected position, kind of a government administrative head for a village or a neighborhood. They help people with various issues, problems, help the needy, etc. So Shaheen is the Muhtar for this neighborhood, one of the old neighborhoods right in the center of town. So we spent some time together in his office, explaining a lot of things to me, talking about his brother and telling me a lot about his version of the history of Sinop over the years. One of the main reasons I went back to Sinop was to visit the graves of my departed friends. So they got together and arranged to take me 3 representatives from the families of my 3 friends. So Oktay took me to his father's grave, Halit took me to his father's grave, and Shaheen took me to his brother's grave. So in one day, we as a group, went around and visited and prayed at all three graves. Very special. This is Selahattin Taban. Selahattin is, I took this photo of him in the tea garden in 1973, maybe 72, I think 70. Anyway, that's Selahattin and his daughter. And I reconnected over the past few years in Facebook. So we got together. So this is Selahattin in the same tea garden and as close as we could remember, in approximately the same spot I took his and his daughter's photo 50 years ago. So very special time to get together with him. Now, as I mentioned, boys like to play. They like to have their pictures taken. This was a photo of some boys playing at Balatar Kalasasi. Kalasasi, is that right? Kalasasi, the church. Anyway, Kilise? Okay. Yes, Balatar. So it's an old Byzantine church. It's been around a long time, undergoing excavation. So this was a photo of some boys. Now, the tall boy in the back, he saw his photo on Facebook. And we connected on Facebook. But anyway, his name is Feridun Armatepi. Feridun went on to become, he's 13 years old here. He went on to become a colonel in the Turkish army. He's retired now, but this is Feridun and I last year at the same ruins of the old church. Okay. And he was just marvelous. He acted as a guide for us many, many days. He drove us around. He introduced us to people. He took us to basically set up an agenda for a lot of the days we were there, and just went above and beyond, and did a lot for us to make our trip very special. But here's a view, you notice in the background, this Sinop Island. And you can kind of see here, we'll see a better picture, but you can kind of see the development on the side, the south side of the island. That wasn't there 50 years ago. But some other friends I'll show you. As I talk, I want to talk about some other things that haven't changed over time. So I showed you a lot that did change in Sinop. Now I'm showing you some things that haven't changed in 50 years. One is the hospitality. And these, I'm going to cite several examples of the wonderful hospitality of people. Now, these people from here on, I didn't know 50 years ago. I've either met them on Facebook, or they've seen some of my old photos I've posted on Facebook and know me from that. But they went out of their way to make my trip, make my son and I feel welcome. So the young man behind me here is Mustafa Bashalu. Mustafa Bashalu, he's a young man, Turkish man, Sinopian, living now in Ankara. But he took a bus 2 different Saturdays that I was there, bus ride up to Sinop, not a short ride, to visit with us. And both of those days, he arranged for his mother to cook meals for us at their farmhouse, just outside of Sinop, Koraju. And that's Mustafa, his uncle, his cousin, and my son. This is one of the meals we had at their farm. And this is, where is she? Oh, on the other side of the table on the right, Hatice. So Hatice Bashalu and some of the family members. And then my old friend Selahattin Taban, he lives very close by. So he came over and joined us for dinner. So I got to spend some more time with him. And again, this is at a farmhouse. Most of that food was grown on the farm. So the vegetables, the meat, everything right from the farm. Delicious Turkish food. Now, this is the view from his farmhouse. where we ate was on a second floor terrace. And this is the view they get every day of Sinop, the island. Now here you can clearly see the development on the island. There was just a very little sliver of that 50 years ago. This is another family that hosted us while we were there. The gentleman in the back, his name is Craig Bernie Burns. And Craig is an American. He married the young lady in the front here, RFA. She's from Sinop. They were both living in the United States. They've since, a few years ago, moved back to Sinop. And we spent some time with them too. Got to know him through Facebook. And Bernie does wonderful videos of various cities in Sinop, in Turkey. So if you want to see some really nice videos that focus on history and food in various cities, all the Black Sea cities and some others, you can watch him. The channel is Last Looks, but wonderful videos. Anyway, RFA arranged for her mother to join us to actually, make the food for us. And Gersen is, you can see her over on the right. She cooked some mante for us and some other Turkish delicacies. But Bernie and RFA spent time, she acting as a translator on several occasions, but just wonderful hosting us. We looked at some old photos of Sinop, showed the kids what Sinop used to look like, all that fun. Now this is the view from their apartment. The Juan family. This is their view, and you can see the Sinop Pier. You can see the inner harbor. You can see some of the wall, the castle over on the right. Another. So I should back up. So all those apartments, buildings you see that have sprung up along the side of the island. Many of them have these kind of beautiful views of the harbor area and the Black Sea. Oops. This is, speaking of food, Sinop is a sea town, so you would expect seafood. This was a marvelous seafood dinner, one of the best I've ever had. So the gentleman on the left, his name is New Octon, and he's one of the Octon family that rented me an apartment 50 years ago. He now owns the restaurant on the first floor of my old apartment building, the Mavi Eye, or Blue Moon restaurant. So he treated us to a wonderful meal. My son and I were there for a long time eating this. We ate almost all of it. And then New came and said, oh my gosh, that's usually a portion for 4 people. So, but anyway, just delicious and very generous of New to host us, give us some great seafood. A lot of good seafood restaurants in Sinop. Some of you may recognize this, Monte. If you've been to Tulip Cafe, you probably got some Monte. Now this is Sinop Monte. It's a little different. Most Monte in Turkey has one type of covering, a garlicky yogurt sauce. In Sinop, they do half with walnuts and half with that garlicky yogurt sauce. It's a Turkish ravioli. So when you get this, some people mix it all together. Some people eat one half and the other, but either way, it's very enjoyable. There's some very nice modern restaurants in Sinop. This is Saray, a restaurant, and there are a couple others that I like. One was Beyazev. The owner there treated us to a wonderful meal there with him. Beyazev is a hotel and restaurant. Beyazev is White House. But, the salads, the kebabs, the lamb chops, and all different kinds of fish. I purposely lost some weight before I went to Sinop this time. It wasn't enough. I gained about 10 pounds in Sinop. But just wonderful food. It was worth every pound of it. Now, so there are a lot of modern restaurants, but there are also these very traditional very limited menu, very limited space kind of restaurants. This is Ahmet. Ahmet, his nickname is Mavra. So Mavra, so it translates to Mavra's place. So this is his little kofta restaurant, Turkish meatballs. He's got, I think, 1 or maybe 2 tables inside and 1 or 2 tables outside on the sidewalk. That's the extent. So a lot of people, pick it up to take home. But if you want to eat there, that's the whole restaurant. But just wonderful, wonderful food.
Maddie?
Now, this is a very interesting place. Yali Kafesi, the waterfront coffee house. It was there when I was there. And back then, though, it was a fisherman's only coffee house. So only fishermen went in there. No women went in. I'm not sure if they were prohibited or just didn't want to go in, but there were no women in there. But it was a place where fishermen gathered the evenings and weekends to talk about fishing, talk about, problems they're having or good places they found to fish or whatever. So I went there a lot with my friend Habesh. Now it's much more of a traditional coffee house. It's right on the seafront. They have tables and chairs outside for, I don't know, maybe 100, 120 people. Very popular, very historic. Now, it used to be called just Yali Kafesi, now it's Tarhimi, historic. So I guess when you get old enough, you're considered historic. So, but that's the historic Yali Kafesi. Now, this is just a few of the people to give you an idea of hospitality. I didn't know any of these people, well, except I see Halit there in the one photo. None of these other people, well, the gentleman down here with the Ozeki. Other than those 2, I didn't know any of these people when I lived in Turkey 50 years ago. Now, I've met some of them on Facebook, or some of them know me from, photos I post. But these people all went out of their way in various ways to make my son and I's trip, more enjoyable. Took us to meals, took us to one gentleman, a boat ride, a barbecue, a traditional Turkish breakfast. I mean, I can spend an hour or 2 talking about each one of them, but just wonderful, wonderful people that I was able to see when I was in Sinop. Now, another thing that hasn't changed in Sinop is the natural areas. So this is an example. This is the Tatlıcı Waterfalls Park. And there's a series of 28 waterfalls in the same valley and paths that you can walk to each of them. But this is one of the waterfalls that we visited when we were there. This is another popular area. It's the İnciburun Lighthouse. It is at the northernmost point of Turkey. And it's an area where you can not only enjoy the lighthouse, but do some hiking and do some picnicking. But we went there when Feridun drove us there with Oktay. Now, another thing that hasn't changed in Sinop is reverence for Ataturk. I think most of you know who Ataturk is, founding father of the Republic of Turkey and its first president. When I lived there, every single house and business had photos of Ataturk in them. And still today, I say the same thing. Every business went into, every house, Ataturk is there. And for holidays, they hang banners. The one on the left is from 1972, across the street from my apartment. The one on the right, I happened to be in town when one of Turkey's holidays, Victory Day. So they had Ataturk banners hanging all over town there. This one's on the old city wall. Now, finally, one of the reasons we went to Turkey was for my son to see some of the modern aquaculture industry in Turkey. So my son, Stephen on the left, he's a professor at Mississippi State University. His specialty is aquaculture and fish health. He's actually internationally recognized as an expert in those fields. He travels around to different countries. He manages different programs in countries around the world, Republic of Georgia, Africa. He's very active now. But he wanted to see the fish farms in Turkey. And so there are some fish farms out in the Black Sea, between Sinop and Trabzon, Samsun area. These fish farms are on a river in Turkey near Derbent Dam, near Bafra. And you can see some of the sea cages. I don't know how many are out there, but each one of those sea cages produces thousands of trout per year used for fish food. And the woman between my son and I, and the man on the other side of me, were two of the people that went with us a whole day. We went to fish processing plants in Yakakent and Bafra, two other cities between Sinop and Samsun. And we had some faculty members. That woman is Farah. She's from Ankara University. And we had representatives from Mayas University in Samsun, faculty members, and we had Ichiba Shahan on my other side of me. He's from the Samsun provincial government. He's with the agriculture, can't remember the exact title, but he came along too. So we had some wonderful industry people with us for my son to meet and learn about the Turkish aquaculture industry. So this is kind of the end, but the last full day I had in Sinop, I spent final time having tea with my friends, and you can see our photos of what we all look like 50 years ago on the bottom. So we've aged a little bit. That's one thing that has changed. But we reminisced about the old days 50 years ago. We reminisced about, our time together for those 16 days in Sinop. So just wonderful, wonderful times. So I know many of my Turkish friends in Sinop are either watching, probably not live because it's 3 or 4 in the morning, but they'll watch the recording. So I just wanted to say a quick note to them. So, sevgili arkadaşlarım, her şey için çok teşekkür ederim. Thank you. So any questions? Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, I was visiting Turkey as a student 40 years ago. I'll ask you a question, and you can be as short or expansive as you like. In the international news, we in the US got from Turkey, of course, it was the seat of the Ottoman Empire, Islamic Ataturk made it secular.
Mhm.
But in the last decade or two, it's become more Islamic through the national government or leanings that way. So my question for you is, compared to 50 years ago, in terms of what you see now, and there have been political tensions between Turkey and its NATO partners over various political issues. So did you feel any major changes in the what the Germans call the zeitgeist, the winds of change, or was it much the same as it had been, or is there more of the national issues penetrating?
Yeah, I'll answer that the best I can. So a couple things. When I was there, virtually every Sinopian I knew were very devout Muslims. So on those minarets, they broadcast out 5 times a day the call to prayer. And all the time when I was there, when that call to prayer came out, many people just stopped what they were doing and prayed right where they were. Many people went to the mosque. I didn't see that much this time, okay? And I know from talking to some of my younger friends there, they expressed that, the religious aspect of Turkish life isn't as strong as it used to be. Now, as far as political, I don't keep in touch with a lot of political. That's very complicated, but I know that there are a lot of people who are dissatisfied, with the current government, with Erdogan, and there are a lot of people who, are really looking forward to some change, and they're disappointed that didn't happen with last year's elections. One of the big problems facing all of Turkey, as far as I know, but I know in Sinop, is the inflation, the economic conditions. Inflation is very bad and has really caused a lot of difficulty for many, many people.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
I noticed in a lot of the pictures, for signage for places, there's a Turkish title and then an English word. Is that multilingualism common? Because I know you mentioned there's a lot of tourism, a lot of things also like in Russian. Like, or is it kind of to accommodate that industry?
Yeah, so let me give my observations about Sinop 50 years ago first. Because of the American base there, which was very important economically to the city of Sinop, you know, the American army bought a lot of goods from Sinop and its vendors and merchants. American soldiers went down in town, spent a lot of money on souvenirs and meals and Effie's beer and whatever. But and there were many craft shops. So boat building shops, knife shops, other kind of shops. So because of the Americans being there, a lot of the shops had the title of the shop in English as well. Most Turkish towns at the time, I don't think, had that. It's because of the American presence. Now, today, because, as you mentioned, the tourism, there are a lot of places, shops that have English, but many of them don't. And English is the only other language I've seen displayed anywhere on signage in Sinop. Yes.
Well, I noticed they use, the same ABCDs we do, the alphabet. But I was curious that you said early on, maybe 2, 3 radio stations, static-y. Is everybody on cell phones now, or?
Yes, it's modern. Everybody, those boys don't play outside like they used to. They've got their cell phones, they've got their video phone. Yeah, it's the same everywhere. Cell phones.
They kept their happiness though. They kept their.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, yes. I mean, just like here, there's a difference between some of the older folk and some of the younger folks, right? So the older folks, they really want the old Sinop back. They don't like this construction, these huge apartment buildings sprouting up all over the place, creating traffic and the cars and the noise and some of that aspect of Sinop. But the younger folks, that's how they grew up. I mean, they're used to that. So they don't mind it as much. They don't miss the olive trees and the nice greenery on the side of the island, like some of the older people do. But yeah, it's very modern. In terms of technology, they've got the same cell phones, they've got modern cars, modern everything, modern appliances.
Internet.
Yeah. So in my judgment, when I was there, Sinop in terms of modernity or modernness, compared to the United States, it was like being in a similar sized town, rural town in the United States in the 1920s, in terms of, what they had available to them. So that was in 1970s, it was about 50 years, what I would call behind technology. Now they've caught up. So in that 50-year span between the 70s and the 2020s, Sinop advanced 100 years worth in 50 years. So they've had rapid change over that 50-year period.
At that time, there was a Cyprus crisis.
Yes, there was.
And,
1974.
On Turkey.
Yes, there was.
And it was creating a huge economical problem for Turkey. And Sinop is still one of the poorest 10 cities in Turkey.
Oh, currently?
Yeah, currently, 81 provinces, and it is the.
Oh, the province.
Yeah.
Province-wise, yeah. Well, there's a big difference too between the main part of the city, Sinop city, and the villages out in the provinces. I mean, there are a couple other large cities, Boyabat, Ianjik, and some others. But yeah, I wasn't aware of that. But what's interesting that you mentioned that, Ali, is that if they're the, what forest?
Cypress?
No, Sinop, you said the
Yeah, forest.
yeah, they're one of the poorer. Interestingly, over the past several years, citizens of Turkey have voted Sinop the happiest city in Turkey. And in fact, the signs around town, Mutlu Kent, Sinop. And it's, happy city. It's been voted the happiest city. So there are still happy people there. There are some. Yes. Yes, sir.
What is the impact there of the Russia-Ukrainian war? There's been a lot of talk on Black Sea and transport there and so forth. I didn't see anything related to that.
Yes, I'm not aware of any direct impact. I mean, obviously, people are concerned because you've got a major, conflict going on. I don't know how far across the Black Sea, Ukraine, but I don't know, 100 miles or 200 miles, whatever it is. That's pretty close to have a major conflict like that. And there's some concern that some of that could spill over. So it's hard to say. I don't know of any direct impact, though, on any commerce or shipping or.
There's migration, like 500,000 Ukrainians and more Russians are now living in Turkey.
Yes, and Sinop has experienced some migration, not a ton of it, but also from places to the south. Yes, yes.
I mean, was there tourists? I mean, you were there in 23. I mean, the war was in effect.
Yes, it was.
Had it impacted tourism? Did
No.
people feel safe being there, I guess.
Yes. I don't think there was a difference in people feeling unsafe or anything.
Just a good season, or is it that pretty year round?
Well, no, the summer is beautiful. Now, if you look from a latitude standpoint, it's pretty close to Columbus, Sinop is. So the weather is fairly similar. Now, because they're out on the Black Sea, they get some more wind, they get more fog probably. But temperatures are pretty similar. One big difference is the United States here in Columbus, if you're look at the low and high temperature every day, there's usually a double-digit swing, right? Between the low temperature and the high temperature. In Sinop, it's usually a 3-degree, maybe 4-degree swing. So the temperature stays more constant. Summers can be warm, like here, humid, a lot of water around. Winters, I would say not as rough. It's windy. There's some snow. A number of people there told me there's a lot less snow now than there used to be, attributable to climate warming. But they notice, some of my older friends vividly noticed the difference between a lot of snow that they were used to and now very little snow. But overall, pretty similar. So the summer, obviously, when people are on vacations, the kids are out of school, summer months are very popular with tourists. If you ever think of going to Sinop, you might want to go in May or September, October timeframe. Still wonderful weather, but without the crowds.
Well, the big difference was the early pictures, there's a couple of electrical poles, and now they must be generating electricity somewhere near there that they didn't have to. I mean, just the gas for the cars, but the electricity for all the refrigerators and microwaves.
Yeah, they're generating it. I'm not sure how. And one thing I didn't mention, when I was there, electricity was very sporadic. There was electricity, but that's why maybe they didn't have refrigerators. Electricity, every week there were outages, some minor, and we were up on the hill at the base, and at night you look down, you see the city lights, and all of a sudden you see a whole chunk of the city go dark, and once in a while the whole town goes dark, so you don't even know there's a city down there. It's because of the electricity, but now it's fine. And there's plans or some possibility of getting a nuclear power plant nearby Sinop now. So that's a big source of controversy in town.
Would you reflect on the status of women?
Compared to 50 years ago? Oh, wow, night and day. I mean, back then, women weren't allowed in many, many places. The coffee house I mentioned and other places. Especially out in the villages, you'd see, and I saw this a lot, and it made me wonder. You'd see women out in the fields, and they've got big loads of sticks or other things on their back hunched over. And the farmer guy was just walking alongside with them. Yeah, it was very different. Today, it's fine. I mean, there are women in government positions, women in all sorts of professions, and yeah. I didn't hear any issues with women or women's rights or anything in Sinop when I was there. Yes.
If people are looking for governmental change and it didn't happen at the last election, do you have any opinion as to why it didn't happen and how likely it is to happen in the near future?
I probably don't have an informed opinion because I'm not sure. There's some people from Turkey here that probably can answer that much better than I can.
Fascinating pride.
Yeah, all I know is that many of my friends, especially, the better educated folks and the people who have been around a long time and professional people, they tend to want change a lot.
Roger, do we have any questions online?
No.
Okay.
Well, I have one observation, and that's the difference between traveling and visiting cities and seeing beautiful buildings and architecture and living with the people. And I think that's what I heard.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 30 minutes. Our fax machine, scanner, and computers shut down 5 minutes before closing. So please save, print, or fax your work now. If you need a ride home, please arrange for your transportation at this time.
Well, I want to thank Kevin for sharing tonight and Hassan for making this possible, particularly for those that will watch it later in Turkey and those that were watching it on. And there are, on the way out, there's still treats. So you can maybe do a little bit of further questions and conversations, but thank you very much. The next, mark your calendars, March 26th is the next Sharing Our Story. And we're going to hear the immigration story of a woman coming from Jamaica. So I highly recommend that you come back. And thank you for those of you online.
And also, everybody for having our film series.